Al Shilosha Divarim Ha'olam Omnei Al Torah V'al Avodah V'al Gemilut Chasadim Al Torah V'al Avodah V'al Gemilut Chasadim. Yeah. Don't need a microphone this way.
Well, you have a voice. I don't think I can forget.
I think everybody can forget. I think it's a matter of use or lose. Not screaming. I don't sound any louder than you are. You have to be able to speak well enough to go in full voice box.
Yelling at someone?
Right?
Yelling at someone?
You use your voice a lot.
It's not as easy.
Oh.
Are we doing Ciudad Procedure?
Well, I don't know. It said the George Nelson.
Well, there we are.
You don't sit here, sit there, it doesn't matter. We belong to Ben and Alana.
Where?
We belong to Ben and Alana Siegel. We're representative.
No, I'm not exactly understanding everything you're saying.
We are the parents and Ben and Alana Siegel. Ben Siegel, Lieutenant Intern.
Oh, from New York.
Baltimore, Chicago.
Or Chicago. Ben from Chicago?
Yes, Ben from Chicago.
Oh yeah. He's doing great here. He's doing really, really well. Everybody, he comes up with low key, but he comes up with really solid stuff.
I know.
We'd like to think it came from us, but
What?
We'd like to think it came from us, but it didn't.
Yeah.
What do you like to watch?
They had the influence on him. That's why he's as good as he is.
And his wife. He and his wife.
They've exceeded their parents.
Yeah.
Both of them.
They're in the new territory.
Well, that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
It could be a good thing.
And then a great thing.
I believe that Jewish children should be in Jewish schools. They should be learning Yiddishkeit because
You should have seen that bat mitzvah today at Ikar. She was dynamite.
or Ikar. I like Ikar. I used to go on Ikar, but I can't run two congregations. Then you end up listening,
Don't they let the people on the one? Don't they let people just attend service the other day?
Oh yeah, you can.
Yeah, but you can't be fully involved in
Yeah.
school.
That's the point. Try to be involved. I go to a place called Link, which is Orthodox. I used to go there for like classes. Not a lot of classes, that one class. So now I'm not thinking, you are.
They are Alana's parents.
Oh, the wife.
They are Ben's parents.
Oh, how do you guys get along? Just kidding.
We get along very, very well.
Impertinent,
We love each other.
We got along right from the scratch.
Oh, that's just bad. It was a bad comment. I don't know where it came from.
No, it's true. I know
There are plenty of people who don't.
Yeah, I don't get
It's
along.
wonderful that you. Yeah, I get along great with my daughter's husband's parents.
If you believe that the kids learn from their parents, or then if two kids go together well, their parents should.
Their parents should.
I mean, we have the same priorities suburban Baltimore.
Columbia, Maryland, in between Baltimore and Washington.
The part of Washington, that metropolitan area. I love Maryland, but I like Ocean City, right? Yeah. I mean, that's what I really enjoy when I was in Maryland. Digging for the crabs and just being there. It's just nice. I love Maryland.
You don't want to be there now.
It's snowing in there.
Is it snowing?
Oh, well, I was there in the summer. I think you could probably figure it out. Right. In Chicago's a great town. My cousin, you might know her, Lizzie Heidemann. She has called the she graduated from Ziegler. She was a intern at UConn, and then she went to Chicago and started it's very similar to what Rabbi Brous has done, called
With the free
Milton.
synagogue?
Tabernacle in the desert.
Mishkan Torah?
What?
The Mishkan?
Mishkan. That's exactly what it's called. Mishkan. Yeah, it's called Mishkan, and she's got a real good following, and she's unaffiliated, like Eckhart, unaffiliated.
Right.
Where this is where I found the congregation united.
United Synagogue,
Yeah.
Conservative Judaism.
USCJ.
USCJ.
Yeah, that one. And she got a nice following. With people like this, just gather them up.
After Shabbat, I'll look.
What?
After Shabbat, I'll look it up.
A Mishkan.
It's probably either in the city.
It is in the city.
So we're out in the suburbs. We're way out. We're like 45 miles out.
On Lake Michigan or on Lake Michigan?
We're out. Highland Park is on the lake. We're like 2 suburbs left of Highland Park. So that's about 5 suburbs north of the
You like it there, right?
Not in the winter so
I
much.
have a cousin in I don't know, anyhow.
You live in the area?
Yes.
Walking.
I work in the area, I live in the area, I dabble in the area.
Do I struggle in the area?
Okay, I have a question for you.
No.
Okay, now here,
Which just costs money. I haven't heard of it.
Irv is very knowledgeable.
Just 50 years.
50 years. United Farm Workers, what
Did
yeah,
you ship that personally?
This is Charlie.
personally.
Yeah, I work with 20 years.
Alright.
I'm still working.
Anyhow,
But go ahead.
alright, so I see a lot of people wearing glasses. Yeah. Okay? I'm the only one that has the glasses tied up with a string.
You don't lose
With a
them.
string. And my question is, I'm constantly losing my glasses. I gotta have them tied like this, or lose. My question is, am I the only one that loses his glasses?
No.
Why does
I could
anybody
lose
else?
my glasses very easy because they get loose. They'll lose something very quick. They won't have a sense of it.
So when I wear my contacts, I lose the readers all the time. But these stay on because if I took these off, I'd probably not know that there was anybody here. How blind I am.
Why were trifocals? That's easy because they went up to the top. But the trifocals broke. Well, the broke is not happening.
Happened?
3:30 in the morning.
Oh, I'm so relieved to hear that news. It's
So are
wonderful.
they.
I can imagine.
Sorry? Yeah. So you go from I was too old for it.
These are the respective parents of Ben Siegel and his wife Alana. Traveling from Maryland and Chicago.
Wow.
To join us.
That's great. That is wonderful. My daughter's family is from Chicago.
Where?
My grandchildren.
Where?
That's a good question. Somewhere.
In Chicago or somewhere?
He's having a senior moment. That's all. Give him a break.
I had senior moments when I was
Highland Park.
5 years old, and I hate to
Yeah,
tell
I
you.
graduated for college.
You know what? We had an emergency. I was there at 4
Yeah.
o'clock, and then Corinne had an emergency, so I had to leave.
Everything's
Well,
okay?
Yeah, we end up blinking the toy and the stuffed animals for donation.
Buffalo Grove?
Because my
River
daughter
one?
daycare in beautiful, expensive one.
And we made
Oh,
it.
that one in the city.
In the city, yeah. In the
Yeah,
city.
yeah. Where we
In
at?
the afternoon, you beat the neck. They go to I felt like an
No
apple.
name, Rob, I told the breath.
Which will be Shabbos. Shabbos Bris.
Sunday, they thought Sunday, because it was 3:30 this morning.
Shabbat.
Right.
Shabbat.
We have another question.
Yeah.
Is this gonna be the kid's bar? It's a question. I mean, if he's born on Shabbat,
gets
1 year, or is
the
it pushed to the following week?
Some families are very, very firm about that. It depends on whether or not this parsha falls before or after his 13th Hebrew birthday. And sometimes it will fall before, and sometimes it will fall after, depending on the calendar. So, yeah.
I love the parsha today. It was perfect. Okay.
This was my son's parsha.
Oh, really? Congratulations.
But particularly have a Jewish boy on Parshat Bo that's not thrown into the river, that's a good sign.
All right, good.
Unless there's a reason to delay the bris medically, the bris would be Shabbos. He must learn that second semester, fifth year of regular school.
We haven't talked to him at all.
Yeah. No, because the day of the birth is considered day 1, and so day 8 would be Shabbat a week from today. And have you met the baby yet?
No, not yet.
Haven't been invited?
Haven't been invited.
Want me to put in a good word for you?
That was great.
Demand it.
Yeah.
Say, "Come here for the
Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. To those here in the chapel and to those joining on Zoom and on live stream, we'll begin Mincha, page 214, the Lev Shalem, with Ashrei. 214. Ashrei Ashrei Beitecha, Ojalu Chasela, Hashem Shekach Lo, Hashem Shadonai Elohav, Dila L'David Rabim Cholim B'Chol Cholim B'Chol B'Chol. Tilat and I daber pi v'rako basar shen kol sheli lambe v'nachnu barechya mi'atav olam hallelujah bal tzion goel l'shavei heshav yaakov ni'uman and Ivan izu b'ti rotam amar l'ruch yisher lecha l'dvar yisher sam tiv pichu l'mushum pichu pizar v'ata kadosh yoshev tilo Yisrael v'kar zel zev yamar kadosh 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 l'etzem l'shalom yimadu Vatisa eni ruach ba'eshma acharei kol rash gadol baruch Adonai mimkomo lavi ruach Hashemit b'traiki Adonai imloch le'olam boher machotei kayom. ויפתחו בך יודעי שמך, כי לא עזבת דורשך אדוני, אדוני חפץ למען צדקו, יגדיל תורה ויאדיר, please rise, יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, גם אדיר אחריותי, וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון ובחייכון, ובחי לכל בית ישראל, בעלה בזמן קריב, ימרו אמן, יהי שמרה ומבורך, לעולם לעם היד, יברך וישתבח, יתפאר שמם ביתנשא, ותדבר לב דלל, שנו קדושה, בריחו, ולנו גברכתה, ותהיה שירתה, לגב נחמתה, דמירן בעלמה וימרו, אמן. ואני תפילתי, לך אדוני עד רצון, להם רוב חסדך, ענני באמת אישך. Gary, do you want to open the ark? ויבן אהרון, ויאמר משה, קומה אדוני ויפוצו אויביך וינוסו משנאיך מפניך, כי מציון תצא תורה, ובדבר אדוני עם ירושלים, בראש נתן תורה, ועמו ישראל בקדושתו. Does anybody have a yort site this week who needs an aliyah? Yes? Okay, you have 2 reasons to have an aliyah. Anyone else? Birthday, celebration, recovering from a surgery, in a good mood? Having a good day. That's good enough. We need a weekday siddur. Hold on 1 second. Good. So you want to be a second rabbi? Yes. Okay, the Torah reading can be found where, Joey?
On
Vayera?
Vayera can be found in the Chaim on page 351. If you're using a different Chumash at home, go to chapter 6, verse 2 of the book of Shemot.
ותגלה ותראה מלכותו, עלינו בזמן קרוב, יכון פליטתנו פליטת אבו בישראל, לכן לחסר רחמים לצום ונאמר אמן. הכל הבו גודל אלוהינו כבוד לתורה יעמוד. אברהם בן שרה בן ימילה, ראשונה ברוך שנתן תורה למשה וקדושתו, ואתם מדבקים לכם, חיים בכם היום.
Baruch atah Adonai. Baruch Adonai Havorach.
Baruch Adonai
Baruch Adonai Havorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai Noseinu Torah.
Amen.
Amen. V'deber Elohim el Moshe v'yamar elav ani Adonai v'ira el Abraham el Isaac ve'el Yaakov ve'el Shaddai u'shmi Adonai lo notati lachem V'gam hekimoti et briti, itom latet lochem, et eretz Canaan, et eretz Mitzrayim, Migarechem asher gavaham. V'gam ani shamati et nakat b'nei Yisrael asher Mitzrayim ve'vodaotaha v'eskar et briti lachem briti.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah temet v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Yamod. Yaakov ben Beryl, the Razel Gala, Yashnia.
Page 352, verse 6.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarah.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Lachein et mor lifnei Yisrael b'nei Adonai. Ani Adonai v'atiti etchem mitachet zivlot Mitzrayim v'tzati etchem me'avadam l'kalti etchem b'zrod yitiyot v'shvatim gedolim v'lacharti etchem li la'am v'akis lachem le'lokim v'datem ki ani Adonai Elokechem homotzi etchem mitachet zivlot Mitzrayim v'cheveiti etchem el haaretz asher nasati et yadi lated otach la'Avraham Yitzchak le'Yaakov v'natati otach lachem Marsha ani Adonai v'diber Moshe ken al b'nei Yisrael v'lo shamu el Moshe b'ktar ruach u'mavadak hasha.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei haolam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Gabriel ben Shin v'chaim halevi l'yashlishi.
Page 353, verse 10.
Baruch Adonai Baruch. Baruch Adonai Baruch Lamad. Baruch Atah Adonai Lamad. Cholam Asher Baruch Habar Mikol Hamim V'Natalanu Tzitzo. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. V'daber Adonai Moshe lemor Mo daber al Paro melech Mitzrayim v'shilach et b'nei Yisrael m'artzom. V'daber Moshe lifnei Adonai lemor hein b'nei Yisrael lo shamu Eli v'yek shamayini Paro b'nei aros evatayim. V'daber Adonai el Moshe v'el Haron v'tzavim el b'nei Yisrael v'el Paro melech Mitzrayim lo hotzi et b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam tzidkenu. Baruch Atah Adonai noten HaTorah.
Please rise. Let's get a chair available for him.
I've never done this before.
Never done it? Okay, open it up to the width of your shoulders.
Okay.
And then careful to move it off the table a little bit. And then push down and then push up. Then turn around.
בכל נתיבותיה שלום, דרכיה דרכי נועם, בכל נתיבותיה שלום, איי איי איי, איי 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 Hashem Elecha ונשוב.
I got it.
All, may God bless all of you.
How many? This goes here.
ככה.
This goes on the celebration side.
It's like Alfred Hitchcock's The Bird, they're just taking over.
You're the only expert in here.
Okay, who had the yurt site? Where'd he go? Did you ran out. Did anyone else have a yurt site while we're waiting? I wanted to do an El Mali. Okay. We'll hand him the Torah. Come forward. Whom are we saying this for?
So this is the Yurte,
Yeah, of
my mother,
mother. What's her Hebrew name?
Sarah Etta,
Sarah Etta, Bat.
Abraham Zelaya.
Okay. You okay? Emale rachamim shochein b'amromim hamsei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashchina b'malot kedoshim utohorim kezohar harakia mazirim lenishmat Sarah Etta bat Avraham veLeah shalcha leolama began Eden tehem menuchata Anaha balarachamim hastireya beseter knafecha liolamim utzror betzrachem et nishmata Adonai hu nachalata v'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava v'nomar amen. And today, as you celebrate the beginning of the second generation from you, you want to share a word about your mother, the generation who preceded you. Memory of her?
She was small but very spunky, and we joked. The most important thing, Friday night Shabbat dinner was dessert. Like, she made that first. If she ran out of time, we might have pizza, but we always had a homemade dessert.
Yehi Zechra Baruch, may her memory be a blessing, and may her spirit be alive in all the generations to come. Anyone else was at your site this week? Okay, I'll take the Torah. No one's announcing themselves. Okay. We are on page 221. Ya'alu et Shem Adonai, ki niskav shemo levado. All that's what Shemayim yarn karen le'amot. Eloho chasidav l'nei shom gvo hallelujah. LeDavid mizmor l'nei arzuya. Telo Yoshua ki yom tzedav el nrod yochanan. Mi ala bahar nam yikum kashud nikicha pavo bar leva b'shol nasal shad nafshi. Lo nishba l'mar yitzavach ma'yisem. Very complicated system. דרכי דרכינו, בכל נתיבותיה שלום, השיבנו אליך ונשוב, חדש ימינו כקדם, יתגדל ויתקדש. שמי רבה, למד ירחתי ומליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומייכון, וחייכו בית ישראל, בגלל בזמן קריב יאמרו אמן, יהי שמו המבורך, לעולם היה יתברך, יברך וישתבח, ויתפאר שמו ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל, שכן קדושה בריחו, לבכל ברכתה ושירתה, תשבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמה, Imaru, Amen. The Amidah said in a quiet whisper, beginning 2:23. If you're still davening, please continue at your own pace. We begin the repetition 2:23. Please remain standing through the Kedusha on 2:25. Adonai, Sfatai, Titach, Fi Agid, Tilatecha, Baruch Ata, Adonai, Eloheinu v'lo Eloheinu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, El Agdol, Agibor, V'yan, Ara, El Yon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Konekol, V'zocher Chastei, Abod, Mavi, Goel, Levnei, V'nehen, Laman, Shemo, B'Yahava, Melech Ozer, Mashiach, Magen, Baruch Ata Adonai, Magen Abraham, Tagi Borle Lamanai Mechem Mitim Atarav Lo Shia Mashiva Ruach Meragashim Mechok Yelchaim Mechesem Mechem Mitim Rachamim Rabim Somech Noflim Rofech Olim Atira Surim Mekayem Emunatoli Shenei Afar Micham Mocha Bagavrod Midom Malach Melech Meimitum Chayim Asmech Yeshua Ben Aman Talach Hayom Meitim Baruch Ata Adonai Mechayem Meitim. Shimcha b'lam kashen shemad shim b'tov b'shmei maram kaydu v'yad niviyach v'karazeh el zeh v'yamar Kadosh 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 Adonai Tzvot Molcha Aretz Kevado Lumatam Baruch Yameru Baruch Adonai Mim Kamod Rekod Shecha Katuv Lemor Lochan Leolam, Lo Hayek Tzion, Lador Vador, Hallelujah, Lador Vador, Nagid Godlecha, Olenetzach Netzachim, Kedushatcha, Nagdish, Veshivchacha, Eloheinu, Mipino Lemosh Leolam Ved, Kiemel Kadosh, Vekadosh, Ata Baruch Ata Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh, Ata Echad. echad v'shimcha echad umi ke'amcha Yisrael umi ke'amcha Yisrael goy echad ba'aretz tiferet gedula va'ateret Yeshua Yom Menucha Uktusha Le'amcha Natata Yom Menucha Uktusha Le'amcha Natata Avraham Yagel Yitzchak Yiranen Yaakov Uvanav Yanuchuvo Yaakov Uvanav Yanuchuvo Menuchat Ava Unedava Menuchat Emet B'Yemuna Menuchat Shalom V'Shava V'Hashked V'Betach Menuchat Shalom V'Shava V'Hashked V'Betach Menuchat Shlema Shetarot Sabah Yakiv V'Necha V'Du Kimir Chaim Menuchatam Ya Menuchatam Yakdishu Et Shemecha Eloheinu V'Levatenu V'Sev Menuchatenu Kadashenu Mitzvotecha V'Den Chalkenu B'Toratecha Sabenu Mituvecha V'Sumchenu B'Shuatecha V'Tahel Libenu Lavdecha V'Yemed V'Anchilenu Eloheinu B'Avar Batzon Shabbat Kodechecha V'Nuchuva Yisrael Mekadesh Shemecha Baruch Atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu B'Mcha Yisrael B'Bid B'Latam B'Yashem V'Avodah B'B'Techa B'Yisrael Yisrael T'Gultam B'Vati B'Al Ratzon V'Til Ratzon Tamid Avidah Yisrael Amecha V'Techazena Neinu B'Shvuchal Tzion B'Rachamin Baruch Atah Adonai HaMachazir Shenato Letzion V'Dim Hatov kilo kalo racham mecham racham kilo tam chasedacham elam kibinu lach v'yal kulam yiparach v'dram shem kamal kiner tamid lila b'ed v'chol lachem yidu chasel v'elu et shem cham emet el yeshuatenu v'ezrotenu sela baruch Ata Adonai Hatov shimcha l'chana el hodod Shalom Rav Yisrael chadasim liolam Kitam el chadon l'chol shalom v'tov beinecha L'varech Chayes b'cholid ub'chol shabi shlomecha Baruch Ata Adonai Amarech Ademo Yisrael b'shalom Top of 230 Tzidkacha tzedek leolam v'torcha emet v'tzidkacha limad mrom asher asita lo t'lohim yichamocha tzidkacha chareel mishpatecha tahom rabba Adam ubehema toshia Adonai yikadav yikadash mirabba Yomad yirakateva michmote b'chayachana v'yimachon v'chaydecho b'yisrael b'gav b'zman kariv yimru amen yehesh miramora Yalama Maya Yibrach Vishtabach Vishparchman Binaseh V'Tadav Yislev V'Talash V'Negudusha Brichu Lama Gobachatav V'Shir Tatu Tav Nechmata Damiran V'Alma V'Imru Amen Tikabel Totan About Handach Yisrael Gadam Handi V'Shmaya V'Imru Amen Yehesh Laramin Shemaya V'Chaim Alam B'Koyisrael V'Imru Amen Oseh Shalom Rama Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'Yal Kol Yisrael V'Meru Amen Aleinu L'Shabeach L'Adonai Kol HaTekos V'Chol Achim Yehush לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא ככתוב בתורתך אדוני מלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר ויען המלך כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד קדישתו mourners קדש יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון ויומייכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן יהי שמי רבא מבורך לעולם לעלמי עלמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה ויאמרו אמן יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה בחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן עושה שלום ורמיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן Sudash Lashid is 2 rooms that way, or 3 actually, possibly. If you're on Zoom, we'll meet you. There's a Zoom open over there. Give us about 10 or 12 minutes to get food, and then we'll start the learning. So see you over there. What's that? Yeah, learning is there.
Chicago?
Yeah.
So you're where in Maryland?
Columbia.
We're Suzanne Grossman.
Was
Was our rabbi. She's still the rabbi? No, she retired a year and a half ago. No, it's Jenny Greenspan. Who's at Ziegler also. Her sister is at Ziegler right now.
Right.
I forgot her sister's name. Suze? I don't remember. Okay. How did that transition go?
So smooth. It was really good. It's like right between Baltimore and Washington. It's a nice community. Very diverse. Everybody gets along. All the congregations are very in their own little niche. But I like this congregation very much. You've been very good to Ben and Ilana.
We're gonna miss them. I'm happy for them. They're showing up, but we're gonna miss them a lot.
And I think Temple Sinai was a very good experience for Ilana in the early childhood education. So they're ready to move on with a baby.
Amazing January.
Oh yeah.
Baby and
Yeah, he's gonna do well. Interviewing right now for rabbis is relatively easy, like last year.
yeah.
I think there's a lot of positions out there.
Yeah. I know he's going to Fairfax, Virginia in January.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then he's interested in Minnesota.
Minnesota and Wynwood, Pennsylvania. Wynwood.
Yeah.
Wow. That's what started.
Because you have to be out.
Are you starting? Are you like staying overnight there? What day are you doing now?
Literally, people left 15 minutes ago. Like, we had people for lunch who, like, yeah. I'll be here for shots. Oh my god, I'm gonna be married.
What was it like when you did your first interview?
Well, she looks like two. Oh my god.
This morning, okay.
I'm so excited. It's our third class meeting. Oh wow. Obviously, two. Jared has one. I'm sure.
All these names.
Yeah, no, you're gonna be
Always love.
I'm so
Can't wait to see you. Oh, I really want to do.
This is your first grade?
Ever. Grandchild.
Wow. The first grade grandchild? Wow.
Yeah.
Like across.
Nice.
Go. Don't worry, I'll start the rabbits. Don't be an angry. Yeah, for sure. Well, I can't imagine Ben and a lot. Either it's gonna be two ways. Either he's gonna be this like sweet and quiet and calm and like sitting in a corner reading a book, or like just like chaos embodied. It's gonna be one or the other.
So you never met Ben's sister?
Yeah.
Yeah. Either gonna be Ben or they were.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Yes.
Just confirming I can be heard. David, Taiba, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay. No, I think it's okay. It's not been very long. I know. I know. The good old days.
It was really good. We had a whole bunch of people that were lots of food, you get together and learn and study, and it was very conducive.
So you'll leave the returns at least for now.
All right. Go blue. Excited? Did you go to the Rose Bowl?
I was sick. I had gone from coming back from Mexico City, so I watched from bed, but it was well worth the watch.
Yeah. We had a bunch of school members who were there. You going to the game? Amazing. Wow. At the Lions Stadium?
Yeah, flying out tomorrow night.
Amazing. Some people only have to share, so take and pass, and if you're sitting next to someone you like, share with them. Oh, you know what? I was expecting chumashim. Does some people want to volunteer to bring a couple of chumashim in? That would be great. Someone to help Bobby get some chumashim?
Oh, he got someone to get it for him.
Yeah, but we need like enough for everybody.
Oh. Pickup truck.
Be like echoes of Desmond Howard.
Yeah. It's crazy.
So the last time they won the championship, it was those years where it was like disputed, right? Because it was not an official championship.
Yeah.
Nebraska?
Nebraska, Michigan. It was crazy too because the last time we beat Alabama was Tom Brady led a comeback.
Really?
Citrus Bowl in 2000.
Both of those semifinal games were actually really great football games.
Yeah, they were excellent. I mean, the Washington Texas game until the last 2 minutes, it was not going to have to spend.
Some people take it from us. We're going to refer to other verses too.
You send him out there.
I'll take.
Everyone have? Okay. I think we're going to be okay because not everyone who's at Mincha is here. So thank God they left. Ba-dum-bum. Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It does feel nostalgic, those of you who've been coming to Shabbat Mincha Betham for a long time, to be back in this room. It's been since pre-COVID, since we did Shabbat Mincha here, but it does feel familiar in a wonderful way. As I mentioned, Shabbat morning services, once a year, like once a year a broken clock is correct, once a year the Parsha aligns with where we are on our Wednesday morning Rashi class. This is a class that I've been teaching pretty much every week I've been in town since I've been at Beth Am, and pretty much every week in the 9 years before that, my former congregation. We started in Breshit Aleph Aleph in the year 2000, and we're now in the 9th chapter of Exodus, the first time around. So we go nice and slow, and there's some of the students in the room. And whenever we get to that parsha, it ends up being a really nice Shabbat morning because you're reading material or you're listening material that you've been studying very closely. You really, ideally, according to the Talmud, should not be confronting the parsha for the first time when you get to shul. You're supposed to have read it twice already, including with one commentary, Shnai Mikra V'Chad Targum. So we haven't quite finished Parshat Ve'era, but those of us in that class have been lingering in that parsha for quite some time. And I decided, just kind of eeny, meeny, miny, mo, because there was not a particular theme that I was hoping to explore this afternoon, that we would study not Rashi, but another commentary on the verse at which we're currently sitting in that study, and it's towards the end of Parshat Ve'era. So open up to chapter 9, verse 7 and 8. You also have the verse on your sheet, but if you're from home, you don't have the sheet. Exodus chapter 9, verse 7 and 8.
We have the sheet, Rabbi. It got sent out in the email.
Yeah, but some people may not have gotten that. But yeah, I was just saying, in case you don't have the sheet and you do have a chumash. Thank you, Tybal. Okay. So we're hanging out here in the precipice between the 5th plague and the 6th plague. The 5th plague being dever, or pestilence, cattle disease, and the 6th plague being boils, shchin. Okay. So let's see where we have ourselves on verse 7 of chapter 9, page 365. By the way, what happened in the previous, let's go back one verse for context. In verse 6, Vayas Adonai et hatavar hazeh, God did this thing, the thing that God said God was going to do, mimocharat, on the day after. Vayamot kol mikne Mitzrayim, all of the cattle of Egypt, or all of the flocks, the livestock of Egypt died. Umi mikne b'nei Israel, but of the livestock of the children of Israel, lo meit echad, not one died. Okay, so that's the implementation of plague number 5. And then all of a sudden in in verse number 7, we have the following phrase, Vayishlach Paro, Pharaoh sent, both in Hebrew and in Hebrew, normally the word sent requires some kind of an object, a direct object or an indirect object. We don't have it. So there's an implied, he sent probably to figure out what was happening out there amongst his livestock. V'hinei, and behold, he learned, Lo meit mi miknei Yisrael ad echad, not a single one of the livestock of Israel died. Vayichbad leiv paro, and he hardened his heart, or his heart remained hardened. The subject of Vayichbad is not Pharaoh, but actually Leiv. The heart of Pharaoh was hardened. Velo shilach et ha'am, and he did not send the people. Okay. If you notice, there's a parsha break there. There's a pei, suggesting that if you were looking at the Torah scroll, this would be the next paragraph. And then we have the following verse: Vayomer Adonai el Moshe v'el Aaron kechu lachem milo chofnechem. God said to Moses and to Aaron, each of you take handfuls, piach kibshan, soot of the kiln, uzirako Moshe hashemayma. This is still God talking and kind of predicting. Moses will throw it, meaning the soot, into the heavens, le'enei Pharaoh, in the eyes of Pharaoh. I only see one microphone here, so when I ask for comments, I'm going to repeat them for the people who are on Zoom. As you think of the transition between verse 7 and verse 8, from the end of plague 5 to the beginning of plague 6, either anything about the way this plague is being introduced, or anything that you recognize compared to the pattern of previous plagues, what jumps out at you, if anything? Norm.
There's not a bunch of conversation and warning to Pharaoh.
Okay.
And demands.
Good. No warning. For the most part, even as we struggle with some of the theological implications of God continuing to like hammer Pharaoh for ostensibly that which God is making Pharaoh do, at least there's a warning, right? In most of the plagues. All of a sudden, Pharaoh's heart is hardened in verse 7, and whammo, we're beginning plague 6. No, there's no conversation of, if you don't release my people, then I'm going to bring the 6th plague upon you. It's just right into plague 6. Anything else strikes you about either any in detail of these two verses or the transition between them? Norm?
Moshe is going to throw the soot up at Aaron, just probably hold his.
Right. So the verse 8 has God speaking to Moses and Aaron, but only one, and telling both of them to do one thing, but then only one of them to do a second thing. He says to Moses and Aaron, take handfuls of soot from the kiln, but only Moses is going to have any job in throwing it up in the air. Okay, what else? So the question might be, why would that be? What else? Anything else jump out at you? Yes, Jackie?
What's interesting if you look at the Hebrew, that it's giving two different directions. That Moshe's throwing it towards the sky into the eyes of Pharaoh. Like that's probably two different directions at the same time.
Right, so Jackie's saying is that at the end of the verse, we have something that could be seen as two different directions at once. Up towards the sky, and le eine Pharaoh could be to the eyes of Pharaoh, like towards him. It could also be understood as in his eyes, meaning visible to him, but it does raise a question as to what's the exact motion. Once again, we always ask in our class, if you were staging this as a play or movie, how would you stage it? What's the motion that Moses is asked to do, particularly if Pharaoh's standing right there? Is it throwing it in his face, or throwing it up in the air, or one hand going perpendicular to the other? Barry?
Well, I'm not answering that question. The first question is, what's the significance of soot?
Okay. What's this piach hakivshan? First of all, it's an interesting word, piach. We studied in Rashi class this week that it probably has to do from the root linnapeach, nun peichet, but the nun falls out, and linnapeach means to blow, to puff out, and soot is the residue of a fire, of a kiln, that can be easily blown around, and kivshan is a kiln, but what's it doing here, right? I mean, and is it the idea, and I'm just wondering, is it the idea that the soot is somehow cool enough for Moses to pick it up with his hands and throw it in the air, but hot enough that when it lands it's going to cause boils? Is there a relationship between the object that's being thrown here and the boils? He's never been asked to do something like this before. It's not putting your staff in the water, putting your staff in the air. What's going on with the soot? Good question. Alan?
Boils are the same thing. Why bother doing this at all? Why do you have this kind of thing? Why can't God just say boils come down? Why is it they have to take this human action to create this?
Good. So all of those questions are really what Alan said, is that why do we have to have any kind of formulaic ritual by Moses or Moses and Aaron for God to bring boils? Can't God say, let there be boils, right? Okay, those are all good setups to the commentary we're going to read. Normally when I teach about Mincha, I bring 4 or 5 different commentators. I was really taken by one long comment by someone that I rarely teach about, just because I don't know why. I don't know why I don't. What's that? Right, Moshe David Cassuto, also known as Umberto Cassuto. He's a fascinating person in Jewish intellectual history. He was a 19th and early 20th century Italian rabbi, and he was one of the first well-known and beloved teachers who spanned the culture between from medieval commentary Judaism and study of Torah and academic, scholarly, historical approach to the study of the tradition. He was a scholar. He was a scholar of Semitic languages. He was a scholar of ancient history. He was a scholar of archaeology. And but he was not a maskil. He was not part of the kind of religious enlightenment that led to conservative and reform Judaism. Right? He probably looked down upon those in that generation. But he was an academic with a university scholar degree. But he was a very frum Jew.
In Italy, that was more acceptable than in most of Europe.
Correct. What Stevie added, that very overlap was more common in the late 19th century in Italy than it would have been, say, in Poland or in Germany. Okay, and his commentary is an interesting one because on nearly every comment in his Torah, and I have no extensive experience with the Cassuto. I don't know nearly as much about his commentary as I do some of the others that I study and quote. But you see an overlap of a traditional from love of text and the mind of an academic scholar, right? Bring them all in together. Look what he says. Piska shishit. I don't know why he calls it piska as opposed to nega, but on the 6th plague, shchin. I'm going to read in the Hebrew. I'll translate phrase by phrase in the English. You can also follow along in the English. Gam lifnei hamaka hashishit. Also regarding this 6th plague, the one that we're about to read about, shehi hashlishit b'machzor hasheni, which is understood to be the 3rd of the 2nd cycle. So there are different ways of dividing the plagues. In Rashi class 2 weeks ago, Barry was talking about how the first 5 and the second 5 might be thought of in a different category. There's another way of thinking about them, that the first 6 come in 2 waves of 3. that have patterns that you can map from the first wave onto the second one. So the sixth plague, right, and we see a remnant of that in the last three ways in which we take wine or grape juice from our cup on Pesach. So the sixth plague, which remember is the third of the second cycle, which means by implication it can be compared to the third of the first cycle. What's the third plague? Kinim, lice, okay. Lo ba'a hatra'a. There was no warning. Kishem shalo ba'a lifnei hashlishit shabin mechzor harishon, which is also the case regarding the third plague of the first cycle. Let's go to the videotape. Any Warner Wolf fans? Anyone? Let's look at the transition to the third plague. So, Kinim. When do the frogs leave? Okay, look at page 361. The bottom of page 361, chapter 8, verse 10. Vayitzberu otam chomarim, the dead frog corpses piled up in heaps. Vativ ash haaretz, the land stunk, verse 11. So this is the end of the second plague. Vayar paro ki ata harvacha. Pharaoh saw there was some kind of like a pause. The hachbeid at libo, once the negative impacts of the plague stopped, he hardened his heart again. Velo shama alehem, didn't listen to them. Kasher diber Adonai, as God had predicted. Boom. Next verse. Vayomer Adonai Moshe emor laron neteat madcha v'hachet afar haaretz v'hayahat lechinim b'chol eretz Yisrael. We have no warning between the second and the third plague. God said to Moses, tell Aaron, extend your staff, smack the dust of the earth, and they will become lice. So Kasuto says plague 6, which is the third plague, is similar to plague 3, the third plague, in that there's no warning. That's the first thing he says. Yeah, Alan?
It also ties in another human activity to create the plague, the third and the sixth. To strike it, they're striking it to strike the dust to create the
Good. Another association. I mean, many of the plagues begin that way, but this also looks like something fine and easily blown, like the afar, that can turn into the plague. Hakatuv misaper lanu miyad. The text actually tells us immediately, meaning without warning. Now in bold, this is a quote from the verse. Vayomer Adonai Moshe v'Aaron, God said to Moses and Aaron, like we just read, Kechu lachem melocho fnechem piach kivshan. Take both of you handfuls of soot, etc. Now he goes on. So he's answered he's drawn a comparison between the third plague and the sixth plague. Madua yesh lahem lakachat piach kivshan lo namar. Why it was the case that they had to take the soot of the kiln was not said. So he's asking a more specific question than the general one that Alan was asking. Alan was asking, why is there any ritual required? Kasuta is saying, why this ritual? It's kind of strange. What's a kiln and soot got to do with this moment of the story? V'lich ora, at first glance, nir'eh hadavar muzar. The thing seems strange. This is a very subtle point. Rashi never would have said that. There's something like the fact he's taking a look at this with an academic, not a cynical eye, but a sufficiently critical eye. Rashi never looks at the Torah and says this is strange. Rashi might think it's strange, but he'll lead you to an answer without in any way kind of suggesting there's anything odd going on in the text. Kasuto says this is an odd thing, right? Why did it happen that way? Aval yesh lasim lev lekach. But we should actually pay attention to this specifically. Shehakivshan hu beit hacharoshet. Kivshan, the kiln, is a kind of a factory, right? A beit hacharoshet is a factory. Shabo ovdim avoda be'esh, within which workers do work with fire, right? So I don't know if anyone has ever spent time in a kiln, right? So he's thinking of Barry. Yes, we have a kilner here, right? So it can be a single apparatus, or it can be like a room, right, within which there are many furnaces going. And this is a hot, smoky, unpleasant, perhaps, place to work if you're working factory hours, not your own hours, making kiddush cups for the bar mitzvah boys of Temple Beth Am. Uvein hashar, sorfim ba'esh et halavinim. And amongst other things that might happen in a kiln, particularly in ancient kilns, they would use fire to do what? To burn the bricks. To burn which bricks? The bricks with which they were asked to do their very hard labor. Omnam hayu hamitzrim. Indeed, even though the Egyptians, lifnei hatkufa haromit, before the Roman era, again, this is the language of a scientist, of a scholar, right? Mishtamshim al rov b'lebenim miyubashot b'chum hashemesh. Even though it's the case that the ancient Egyptians, for the most part, used the majority of their bricks as being bricks that were dried out by the heat of the sun, right? Think about it, right? The simpler, it might take longer, but the simpler way to have something be dried out in the ancient world, if you don't have like a operating furnace, is just to have it be, laid out in a hot Middle East sun, and that would turn them into bricks. And even though most of the bricks that were done in ancient Egypt before the Roman period were done that way, 1 second, Barry. Aval gam sreifat halvenim bekivshan haita nehuga Islam. It was also the case, he's saying from his historical studies, that you could find bricks in ancient Egypt that were made by burning in a kiln. Barry?
Dried clay is called greenware, and when it gets wet, it dissolves. So if you build anything with greenware bricks, after a few seasons, you have nothing left.
Got it.
Putting it into a high fire, that's called bisqueware, and that'll last a few seasons.
Thank you. So we've got from the local expert that if you do make bricks by drying it out in the sun, it might last you a bit, but the rain's going to break it down. If you fire it in a furnace, it's going to last a lot longer. So that was an important technological advance, and that became more common after the Roman period. But they, even in the early Egyptian period, they did it a little bit. V'dafka b'binyanim mimei hashushelet ha'tsha'asrei. And specifically in regard to buildings from the 19th dynasty of Egyptian kings, Ashushelet is a dynasty, she'eleha shayach Ramses Hasheni, to which dynasty the second Ramses was connected, hu oto paro she'ibed Yisrael, the very pharaoh that enslaved Israelites. Ayin lamala amud, he tells us, look earlier in my commentary if you want to look more on that. Umimei hashushelet ta'asrim, and from the days of the 20th dynasty, nimtseu kama pa'amim levenim srufot b'eish. He's saying archaeological studies have shown, right? I didn't check out his sources, but I have no reason to disbelieve him. Archaeological studies have shown, and carbon dating has shown, Egyptian bricks burned in a kiln as old as the dynasty associated with the pharaoh who enslaved the Egyptians. No carbon dating?
At the turn of the century, isn't that like 120 years ago?
No? Okay. What's that? I told Tova to come to this class, but Tova is under the weather right now, so she's excused. Okay? So from the knowledge he had at the time, they seem confident that you had this technology working as old as the dynasties that are associated with the oppression of the Israelites. Okay? Can anyone see where he's going here? Right? He's sort of telegraphing it. V'hinei nemar lamala, and it said above, she'asiyat halavanim haita achat avodot hakashot hamutalot al bnei Yisrael b'Mitzrayim. It said above, where, we'll look at it in a second, chapter 1, verse 14, that making bricks was actually some of the harshest labor that was imposed upon the Israelites in Egypt. Look at Exodus chapter 1, verse 14 that we read this morning. Actually, I don't know if we read it this morning. Chapter 1, verse 14 of Shemot. That will be page 319. Okay? So as the enslavement is getting intense, verse 13, Vayavidu Mitzrayim et bnei Yisrael b'farach, the Egyptians worked the Israelites ruthlessly, Vayamaru et chayehem, embittered their lives ba'avodah kasha, with hard work, b'chomer uvilvenim, and with material and with the back-breaking, sweat-inducing duty of making bricks, uv'chol avodah basadeh, in addition to back-breaking work in the field. So Kasuto's saying, the thing that took place in the kiln was associated with some of the most oppressive work that this regime was imposing upon the Israelites. Back to our pages in the bottom, page 2. V'kanireh yesh kesher. Sorry, I skipped a line. V'dafka avodatam ha'ikarit. In fact, it was. You could say that it was the most significant aspect of the work they were doing. Look at chapter 5, verse 7. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but there's a scene at the end of the book of Parshat Shmot where, after the first time, there's a complaint. Pharaoh makes their job harder, not easier. Right? Says, not only do you have to make the same amount of bricks, but I'm going to take away. You have to gather the straw to make it. So it was the making of the straw in a challenging way that was considered to be like the central aspect of the backbreaking work they were doing. Barry?
Comparison, the pyramids in Asia, the country that they made last, they were built just a few centuries ago and they're gone. The size of the pyramids in Egypt, monstrous. Every one of those bricks, the size of every one of those bricks was kiln fired.
Yeah. So Barry telling us that the pyramids in Egypt that have lasted were all kiln fired, and probably to great discomfort, to say the very least, of the people who were doing it. Okay. Third line from the bottom of page 2. The kanireh yesh kesher bein shnei hadvarim. It appears that there is a connection between these two things. What two things? The fact that the sixth plague of boils was begun with soot of the kiln, and the fact that the Israelites were hard at work where? Possibly in the kilns burning the bricks. Ashan hakivshan, or Eshan hakivshan, mitpazer mehera ba'avir. The smoke from a kiln, as soon as it leaves the kiln, it dissipates very quickly into the air, right? There's no remnant of the smoke. I mean, we're probably breathing it, but you can't trace it in the same way. V'halvenim muvaot b'mugdam u'b'muchar michutz lebeit hacharoshet. Not sure exactly what he means here, b'mugdam u'muchar. Literally, it says the bricks are brought either early or late outside the factory. I think he's saying one way or another, whether being... Okay, but one way or other, the bricks that are made in the kiln don't stay at the kiln, right? Eventually, they're made in the kiln to be brought out to be built with, right? So they eventually leave the factory. So the smoke leaves the factory, the bricks leaves the factory. What doesn't leave the factory? The soot. Aval hapiach. But the black soot that represented the hard labor of the Israelites, nishar kayam al kotlei hakivshan, stays in existence as evidence on the walls of the kiln. I can't help myself from making the connection of what the walls of the crematoria in Poland still look like, right? So it's not thousands of years later, it's decades later, but it's still there. And until and unless those walls come crumbling down, and they should never come crumbling down because they are a testament to what took place to us, you literally see, not symbolically see, you literally see the blackened walls of the crematoria that were created with the soot of our people. Right? And obviously Kasuta wasn't referring to that because he's living before the Shoah. Although I think he lived until the 1950s. So I don't know when he's writing this particular commentary. Doesn't matter. And it symbolizes and exemplifies the soot, the hard work, shel po'apolim, of the workers. Therefore, min hadin, it makes total sense. Yesh Piach said that this very soot, which represents the harshest part and the most enduring part of the harshest labor, shenotzar ki'ilu mitoch ze'at apehem shel ha'mishuabdim, that was created, as it were, from the sweat of the brows or of the noses of those enslaved, yavi onesh al bsaram shel ha'mishabdim, would be the very thing by which the punishment would fall. Where? On the skin. That's why it's shchin, right? Because where does soot mark you? On your skin. So you take the soot that marked the walls and clearly marked the Israelites who were making the bricks, and that's going to be the vehicle by which the skin of the oppressors, of the enslavers, is going to be also burned, not blackened by soot, but reddened by boils. Okay? So all of a sudden, you can't imagine a more appropriate way for this plague to begin.
It's one of the most unusual midah connected midah that I've ever encountered.
Yeah, so what Alan said, it's one of the most unusual and I would say apt midah connected midah, measure for measure. What started out as Kasuta saying, this is odd, now lands after his study with us, right, as the most non-odd way to begin any of the plagues. Okay. Now he goes on to part two, right? Through the question of another kind of responding to another question that we had around the table, which is why it is that Moses and Aaron were treated differently in this verse. In the beginning, they were treated the same, then different. Ein limtso kushi b'davar. Don't find it difficult. The fact, what fact? Shagam Moshe, the Gam Aaron, mitzuvim lakachat melochofnehem. Both Aaron and Moses were commanded to take full handfuls, piach hakivshan, of the soot of the kiln. Afterwards, it said that only Moses is going to throw it in the air. We talked about that. Why is that the case? Moshe levado, and only Moses. Lifnei paro, in front of Pharaoh. B'li shum milah meforesha, without any explicit word. Al ma she'aseh Aaron b'melochof navu. What's Aaron doing with his handfuls? Right. The way the Torah tells it, Moses and Aaron each scoop up soot, and then Aaron just stands there with soot in his hands. What's going on? He's not the one throwing it up. Kan yireh aleinu l'ta'er lanu et ha'inyan b'derech zeh. He says it makes sense for us to explain or describe the scene in this way. Shnehem ba'im l'toch ha'kivshan. Two men walk into a kiln. Sounds like a joke. Two men walk into the kiln. Ushnehem lokchim melochofnehem. Two of them take handfuls. Because a chofen is a handful, so full handfuls. Piach of soot, hakivshan from the kiln. V'samim oto betoch kli. They don't just hold it in their hands. They take that soot, and even though the Torah doesn't tell us to do it this way, it puts it in a vessel. Me'ein kufsa, okayotz, some kind of a container, a box. Kedei lahavio lifnei paro. This goes to your question, Jackie. Like, where is this taking place? According to Kasuto, they each had two scoopfuls. Those scoopfuls were denoting an amount. How much soot? The amount of soot that two men could carry, and then put in a vessel, because Pharaoh's not at the kiln, right? They're taking it from the kiln. You think it's still going to be in their hands? You ever tried to hold sand for more than a half second, right? If you're in the kiln, and you can be sure that Pharaoh's chambers are far away from the kiln, and they tried to carry it in their hands, it would dissipate. They put it in a box in order to bring it in front of Pharaoh. They're not going to go in front of the king with hands blackened by soot. This was the amount they were taking. They put it in a container, they washed their hands, and then they go and have an audience with Pharaoh. And when they were finally standing in front of Pharaoh, Moses would take all of the soot in the vessel, and he did this. So it's not that Aaron didn't have a job. His job was you needed two full double hands worth of soot for this particular act. Where am I? Page 4. We have proof from this, from that which we learn in the 16th chapter of Leviticus, verse 12. So open up your Chumashim to that chapter. This is Parshat Acharei Mot. We read this also on Yom Kippur morning, and it's the example of the ritual for how the Kohen Gadol would operate on Yom Kippur. Verse 12, 681. 681. So just start with verse 11. V'hikriv Aaron parachatat, that Aaron would slaughter the bull for the sin offering. Asher lo, that he had. V'chiper ba'ado ba'ad beito, he would offer atonement for himself and his household. V'shachat et parachatat asher lo, and he would slaughter it. V'lakach melo hamachta gachalei eish. He would take kind of a full panful. A machta is a panful of gachalei eish, of the coals. Me'al hamizbeach, from the altar, milifnei Adonai, before God, umelo chofnav, and also 2 handfuls of soot, ketorat samim, of incense, daka, finely ground. Vehevi mi beit la parochet. We've read this verse hundreds of times, and before I read Kasuto, I never stopped to think: does the high priest have 2 hands or 3 hands? Because in this verse, he's taking a full panful of glowing coals, and also molo chofnav, 2 handfuls of soot. That's 3 hands. I'm not a mathematician, but that's 3 hands. Kasuto says, see, the same thing is happening In this verse, it was happening in Egypt. So he quotes the verse, go down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines of the Hebrew at the end. Barur davar. The case is clear. She'ilu hayu shtei yadav shel hakohen leod ketoret. If the two hands of the Kohen were filled with spices, as it says it is, lo hayav sharlo lechos b'machta. He would not have had a hand unless he's like doing it with his elbows, right? I don't know. What are you laughing at? Right. Obvious to him, right? That if you read that verse carefully, it is suggesting an octopus, right? Or there's a step missing that we're not told about. Ella hakavanahi, but rather the intent is, and he says, compare to Mishnah Yoma chapter 5, verse 1, which we'll look at in a second. Shia Kohen, what did the Kohen do? Chofen malo chafnav, he takes 2 scoopfuls of the incense, and then he puts it into the ladle, right? He's not holding it indefinitely. That is an amount. It's not the key part of the ritual. The amount is 2 scoopfuls. Look how he connects it to Mishnah Yoma. So Mishnah Yoma is mostly the laws not about what we think of as Yom Kippur, the fast, but the ritual in the temple. And look what it says in the opening Mishnah of this 5th chapter of Yoma. Hotzio lo et hakaf et hamachta. They brought, the assistant priest would bring out the kaf, the ladle. Kaf in modern Hebrew is a spoon, but in rabbinic Hebrew it's a ladle, like a big scooping spoon. V'yatamachta, and the coal pan. V'chafan malo chafnav, he would take the fill of his hands. And how do we know it's hands and not hand? Because chofnav is plural. It's not chofno, it's chofnav. So he would fill his hands, v'natan latoch hakaf, and he'd take the total amount he'd scooped up and he put it in the ladle. Hagadol lefi godlo, v'katan lefi kodno. The big one according to its bigness and the small one according to its smallness. Anyone know what that might refer to? Size of the hands. The Kohanim were different sizes. Some Kohanim were 6'2", and some were 5'4". And there's commentary in the Mishnah that says that based on which Kohen was serving at a time, they had different sized ladles. Because the idea was that if you were going to scoop up this much, you should have a ladle big enough to put into. But if you were going to scoop up this much, you shouldn't be embarrassed by your tiny little hands that it wasn't going to fill up the ladle, because you should have the full honor of doing the ritual no matter how big your hands were. Some people have big hands, some people have small hands. Okay? The kach haita midata, and that was its size, which means that each Kohen had their own kind of proprietary ladle for the ritual. Ladle, as you know, we talked about this in Raj class, one of the English words that most sounds like it's from Yiddish. Okay, just want to make sure we're on the same page. Ladle and far-fetched. Natal et hamachta bimino, he took the fire pan in his right hand, v'et hakaf, and the ladle filled with the amount of soot, or in this case incense, that had been taken by both of his hands in his left hand. That's how he performed the ritual. Kasuta says, read that back into our scene, and it becomes very obvious. Aaron and Moses go into the kiln. Take how much soot? The amount of soot that you both can fill up in both of your hands, 4 heaping handfuls of soot. Put it into a box, even though it's not written there. Go wash your hands so that you can go in front of Pharaoh like a mensch. And then once you're in front of Pharaoh, who's initiating this plague? Some plagues are initiated by Aaron. Some plagues are initiated by Moshe. This one's initiated by Moshe. Throw it up, either up into the sky or into Pharaoh's eyes, or both at the same time. I wanted to bring this to you just as an example of a different way of doing Torah study than your classic medieval commentaries, because he's weaving together history and science and archaeology, but still with a loving loyalty to this text. He wants to solve this so that when you're done reading it, all of a sudden the scene makes sense. First, he makes the scene not make sense by forcing you to read it slowly, and then he resolves the not making sense by saying there's actually a very easy way of explaining all of this. Yeah. So I'm now more committed to studying and teaching Kasuto than I had been in the past. I just hadn't come across him in quite some time, and I thought this was worth a lengthy sit down with you. Comments, questions, reactions? Stevie.
I mean, it opens up the question without answering about what the symbolism is that Aaron participates, right? That
right? If it was simply a volume question, Moses could just take 4 handfuls or however much, is required.
Yeah.
But like there's something significant that Moses and Aaron are both, dirtying their hands, and he doesn't explain that himself. He sort of leaves that to the reader.
Yeah, what Stevie said for those on Zoom is that his resolution resolves the two questions he was working on, but leaves open others, which is, Moses. If it was just volume, as Stevie said, Moses could have done the action twice. Why is Aaron involved in the bringing the soot out? Right? I could produce an answer to that. Doesn't mean it's the answer, but it's an interesting question. Like, why is it significant that both representatives of the people get their hands dirty with the soot that Kasuta reminds us is symbolizing the very burden that the people are under? That's a good question. Norm, was there a hand down over there?
It seems to me that usually when God wants Aaron to do something, he tells Moshe to tell him. And in this case, he said he told Moshe and Aaron.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So Norm is pointing out that sometimes God tells Moses to tell Aaron to do something. This time, God is speaking to both of them. Tybal, I see your hand up.
Yes, if it's okay. I was just interested on the happenstance that you found Casuto and decided to look at him where you don't usually.
Yeah, so at some point this week, I guess after Rashi class on Wednesday, when I realized that I'd be teaching Shabbat Mincha and it was on the Parsha that we are in class, I'm like, well, where did we stop? I'm committed to teaching Rashi on this verse this coming Wednesday, but who else has something interesting to say? So, in a former era, that would be, going through my bookshelf. And in this era, it's called Safaria. So basically, I had a fun hour on Safaria, reading as many commentaries as I could on this verse until I found one who, they're all interesting, of course, but that was worthy of exploration. Originally, I was going to bring several, but once I got to Kasuto and got a sense of what he's saying, I thought it was worth lingering on the entire commentary. But it was as random as that. It was what was on Safaria on a verse that I'd already committed to teaching to anyone but Rashi, because you have to come to class Wednesday morning to get the Rashi on this. I'm going to repeat all of this on Wednesday. No, I'm not. Okay, Kasuto, Yehi Zechro Baruch. May his memory be a blessing, and may we come back to him sooner rather than later. Let's do Birkat Hamazon. Joey, did you eat bread? Okay, can someone pass this to Joey?
Shir Hamalot B'Shuv Adonai Et Shivat Zion Hayinu Kechol Emim Az Yemale Sechok Pinu Ulshonenu Rina Az Yomeru Vagoim Higdil Adonai Lasoti Mele Higdil Adonai Lasoti Manu Hayinu Semechim Shuva Adonai Et Shavitenu Ka'afikim ba'negev hazorim bedima berina yiktoru haloch yelech uvacho no se meshech hazara bo yavo berina no se halumotav Rabbatain Varech Yehi Shem Adonai Baruch Me'atav Yad Olam B'Yeshua Maran Rabbatai Yerechel Hinu Shechal Nimishalo Baruch Hinu Shechal Nimishalo Tavo Chayinu Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Hazan et HaOlam Kulo B'Tuvo B'Chein B'Chesed U'Vrachamim Hu Notein Lechem L'Chol Basar Ki L'Olam Chasto Uvtubo Hagadol Tamid L'Chasar Lanu Ve'ayachsar Lanu Mazon L'Olam Ba'ed Bavur Shemo Hagadol Ki Mozan Parnes L'Akol Umetiv L'Akol Umechin Mazon L'Chol Beriotav Asher Bara Baruch Atah Adonai Hazan et HaKol
No, de lecha Adonai Elohim.
I've heard of that. All right, I saw you.
That's where we met.
All right. It's been a rough semester. And you did not TU? So
I did
you're a
that to you.
freshman.
Yes.
Go well so far?
Yeah.
Let's start with Kaddish Rabbanan. Do you want me to leave that or you leave it?
I can do it.
You don't like potatoes, you don't like that.
For me?
And how do you know US wine?
No, from Israel.
From the CY.
Oh, got it.
Yeah. He was
Nope.
never in USY.
I was never in USY. I was in
Oh,
BYO.
right, because you're from Riverdale.
Yeah.
Potatoes, I mean.
Riverdale should have a USY chapter. We just, I mean, what did he?
Two plates here like this.
New York USY is really sweet. Did you grow up? No, you didn't grow up in Maine. I know. Now fiance is from
Your best friend is now here. Where is she? It's a nice chapter. Minha. Okay, page 111 for Kaddish to Rabbanan.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
אמן.
למד יברח ומתי ומליך מלכותי בחייכון ובכל וחיית ובית ישראל בגלה וזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רברך עליו ורחם יתברך ושתבח ויתברך ותורה מנסי ויתזר ויתלה ויתלה ושמשה בריחו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ואשרתה ותשבחתה ונוחתה דאמרה במה ואמרו אמן. על ישראל ועל רבנן ועל תלמידי חון ועל כל תלמידי תלמידי חון ועל כל מאן דעסקים באורייתא דיבה התורה הדין ודיבה כל אתר ואתר יחל לכון ולכון שלום הרב אחינו וחיסה ורחמים וחיי נריחין וזרוב פרם מכונם אבוכון ושמעיה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלום מן שמעיה וחיים טובים עלינו וכל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום עם רב הוא יעשה שלום עלינו וכל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
Didn't I read you last year briefly when you were on that feed?
It's very possible.
Mariv on page 264. We rise to the Baruch Hu, after which we may be seated.
וכו' ולהשקיט ובעל שפבך וכמתו אדוני השם אלוקינו ויום קוראנו ברוך הוא את אדוני מברך ברוך אדוני מברך לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני מלך העולם השכיב ורמי ורבי ויום מלילה מג'ב יום ולילה אדוני צבאות שם ולחי וחיים תמינו לך לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני המרי ורבי אהבת אלוהים ברוך תבוא תביא אסלח ותתק ותתק כי אם חיינו ורחמנו בהם נגב ולילה ותחד סיום לעולמים ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד ברוך שם Jesus, give me Adonai lechem emet v'munach ומלכות הרצון קיבלו לכם משה מרים ובני צלח שירה ושמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מיכאל מוכר לאדוני מיכאל מוכר נדבר קודש נוראתי לו תוסף אליהם מלכות יחר בנך בוקר לפני משה זה לי אנו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר כי בדנת יעקב וגם חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל השיבנו אדוני לשלכם וחסד ותקש ממך ושמרתנו בואי לחיים של העולם ברוך אתה אדוני שומר עמו ישראל עד ברוך אדוני אמן וברוך אדוני ציון שכם ירושלים ברוך אדוני ישראל ארץ אמן ויאמן ברוך אדוני ויאמן ברוך אדוני כי מלכות של החיות ובדבר כן על המלך אתה ברוך אתה אדוני המלך מירות אבינו לך לעולם ועד והכל מעשיו יקרא וקרא שם ירבה מדי ברוך אתה מלכותי וחייכון ובכל וחי תגבי תשרה בגלה בזמן קריב אמרו אמן יש מרברך לעולם ועמל מיה יברך ושבח פתרון מנסה ותלה 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 שבילות שברכו לילה מלכות ברכתה ושעתה תשוקתה ונוחתה אמן 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 ואמרו אמן אתה אחרתנו
Chatzi Kaddish 279.
Yikara v'yikara shemerba. Mati b'rakad v'chad b'chaychon v'chon v'chaytu b'yitzra v'chad margarpim ramein. Yishma barach. Yibarach v'shabach v'nor sevet lavet lavet la shmukha shabrichu. Leila mikra b'yit v'shveta shmukha tam v'chayta dam rabim ramein. V'yinu v'adonai leinu v'yinu v'aseh v'yinu v'adonai
Back to 216, second paragraph. Kaddish Shalem 280.
Yikara v'yikara shemerba. Mati b'rakad v'chad b'chaychon v'chaytu b'yitzra v'chad margarpim ramein. Yishma barach. Lam yomei amaya. Yikbarach v'shabach v'yitzra v'yinaseh. V'ktar v'yitla shmukha shabrichu. Leila mikra b'yit v'shveta. Tushvachata v'mukata dam rabim ramein. V'tchabat taran mod Yisrael v'shmayavim ramein. Yish ramein shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'kol Yisravim ramein. Aseh shalom rabbi aseh shalom aleinu v'kol Yisravim ramein. Aleinu v'shavech Adonai kol
Adonai Kol 281. Kadisha Tomorners Kaddish, page 282.
Yirkadav, Yirkadash, Shemei Rabba, V'mad Yivrach Yirutei, V'emlich Malchutei, V'chayechon, V'mechon, V'chayei, D'chol Beit Yisrael, V'agala, V'yisman Kari, V'imru, Amen. Yehi Shemei Rabba Mevarach, L'olam V'amei Amaya. Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitromam, V'yitnaseh, V'yitadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitalal, Shemei D'kudesha, Brichu, Leila, Min Kol, Birchata, V'shirata, Tush bechata v'nemchvata damiram be'alma v'yimru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'akol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Aseh shalom v'yiramav kuya aseh shalom aleinu v'akol Yisrael v'yimru amen.
As we've been concluding every service since October 7th, we conclude with Hatikva, page 448.
Nefesh Yehudi Homiya Ufatei Mizrach Kadima Ayin Lesiyot Sophia Od Lo Avda Tikvateinu Hatikva Bashnot Alpayim Liatam Chokshi Be'artzeinu Eretz Zion Yerushalayim Liatam Chokshi Be'artzeinu Eretz Zion Yerushalayim.
Yesher Koach to Mateo. Someone want to dim the lights? Anay 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 Yeshuati, eftach velo efchad, ki ozim ezim radia, Adonai vayehi li lishu. Ushaftim mayim besason, mimaynei Yeshua, Ladonai Yeshua, alamcha birchatecha sela, Adonai tzvaot imanu, niskalanu, Elohei Yaakov sela, Adonai Tzevaot, Asher Yada Botei Yabach, Adonai Yoshia, Melech Yaneinu V'Yom Koreinu, La Yehudim Hayta Ora, V'Simcha V'Sason, V'Yekar Kenti Yelanu, Kos Yeshua Tesa, Ubeshem Adonai Ekra, Yainanai, Yananai, Ainanai, Yananai, Baruch Atah Adonai Machalam Borei Pragafen, Baruch Atah Adonai Machalam Borei Minei Besamim. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Machalam Borei Miorei Ha'esh. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Machalam Avdil Ben Kodesh Chol Ben Elchosh Ben Yisraelim Mim Yom HaShilish Sheshem Mehamase. Baruch Atah Adonai Hamavdil Ben Kodesh L'Chol. Hamavdil Ben Kodesh L'Chol. Chatoteinu Yimchol. Zareinu v'chaspeinu yarbe yarbe kacho o v'kacho chavim balayla. Zareinu v'chaspeinu yarbe yarbe kacho o v'kacho chavim balayla. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Atishbi, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Agiladi, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Atishbi, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Agiladi. B'mehera yavo eleinu, Imashia ben David. B'mehera yavo eleinu, Imashia.
Shavua Tov, everybody. May God bless you all. God will protect you from the violence outside. They punched me.
I miss you passing around the little shots of grape juice.
Chico azienda è the guy came
Yes.
out of
Rabbi, just remember, in the old days, it was Gary's job to fill up all of the Kiddush cups and to pass it around him.
I was going to pour some to the lady. I know, no, it's all of that. Anyways, quick question for you, a comment. I'm still, I'm getting there.
They have to have it because if they catch first, they have to go to court. No, it's a soft.
There's still space. It might fill up soon.
I give you 1 minute, I want to ask Rabbi a question, and then we'll walk. Marshall joined
Shavua Tov, Tybal, AJ. Yeah.
Hi, Marlies. You look as if you got your hair cut. Hi, Alan.
Oh, thank you. I did.
Is Gary there? I thought I just saw
He's
Gary.
there.
Hi, Alan. Hi, Marlies. Hey, Tybal.
Good to see you. Shavua Tov.
Quick question, Rabbi.
Hey, Gary. I got your email.
Everyone says, many people say, my mother was a widow for the last 40
Oh, and I got your email, Tybal. Thank you for that. I didn't reply.
And do I remember what I sent? Of course not.
That's okay. I will reply to you. And you'll. Anyway.
How you feeling, Tybal?
Thank you for asking. Were you here? I think it was 2 Shabbos ago. I benched Gomil.
Actually, I heard it, but I was in Los Angeles at
Oh,
the time.
right. I do remember I saw you in Los Angeles. Well, the lethal part is over, but the getting past sepsis is not easy. That's I'll just say.
Okay.
So are you back? I'm assuming you're back in Northern Virginia?
I am.
And did
Yes.
you laugh at all the storm warnings that turned out to be nothing?
Well, we got some a little bit of flurry, not much, but yeah, these people were not panicking or anything. I didn't see a huge number of people at the grocery store stocking up or anything. I think most people just figured, okay.
I got so many. I mean, I'm not out, but I'm just laughing. But in part, I'm from Pittsburgh, so you know it makes me laugh. Anyway. But thank you for asking. How are you?
I'm okay. So far, so good.
And how long, do you know yet how long your assignment will have you in Northern Virginia?
Not, I don't have a definitive time frame right now. I had allowed for 3 years. Still allowing for 3 years.
Oh, that's a long time. I don't know why I
Yeah.
thought it was months, not years, but got it.
Yeah, actually, I don't plan to be back out in Los Angeles until end of December of 24. But hopefully I will see Marlise and Gary and Rabbi